Oh, what's good, everybody? Welcome to episode 2 of the Celtics Chronicle podcast, brought to you by the Celtics Chronicle newsletter. As usual, I'm your host, Adam Taylor. I'm joined by a longtime basketball compadre, probably, definitely my best friend in basketball, somebody I've been chilling with for a very, very long time on podcasts across multiple different names, covering multiple different things. Mr. Brendan Nunez of I don't even know who you work for anymore, Brendan. Who you work for these days?
Sacktown Sports,
There we go.
mainly Sacramento Kings. Grew up a Celtics guy, and you and I did a lot of Celtics stuff in the past and plenty of other things. A whole podcast network may have existed at one point, but we're back at it.
Yeah, so if anybody's read the initial kind of podcast release that I sent out via the newsletter, you'll know that Brendan is credentialed media for the Kings, but we came up together covering the Celtics. So when I kind of transitioned into launching this show, Brendan was nice enough to be like, "Well, the Kings ain't doing shit right now, so I might as well come and help out." And I was like, "Yeah, you might as well." So here we are, man.
You're
Here
not
we
wrong.
are. Uh,
Yeah, that's where we're at. I get to actually watch some postseason basketball.
some
Well, I was
winning.
watching, but yeah, I get to, have some stakes in it, I guess.
Yeah, kinda got some skin back in the game, right?
Right.
You had that itch, and I get that. I get that. Like, it's tough, right? Like,
I tried to find my Scary Terry as I mute my phone here, very unprofessional. I tried to find my old Scary Terry shirt because I thought it'd be fitting, even though he's not playing from the year that he started in place of Kyrie and hit that game one game winner over the Bucks. One of my favorites. I tried to find the shirt and I could not find it.
yeah, you're a Kings guy at this point, but the way I look at it is, especially from my perspective, when you cover a team, like, that's what you do, like, that's your job, it's really difficult to keep up with other teams around the league, especially when those teams are in the opposite conference, right? So,
For sure.
you not really having a team to cover right now really helps out me, and it helps you kind of catch back up with a team that you were covering during the initial rebuild, right? So that's kind of where I want to start this before we get into some game coverage. Like, the last time we really ran a podcast together was, I think, the Kyrie Irving season. So just
Yeah.
before, you know,
Yeah.
the Boyery Irving season, as I like to call it. Don't come at me. That's the new name for that season, the Boyery Irving, because we waved by at the end. So you come in, you watch a game last night. Obviously, you've watched games here and there. They've played the Kings a few times. They've whooped the Kings on consistent basis.
There was a Xavier Tillman game winner
But
this year,
that's hard, right? Because
who the
it's
Kings
such.
drafted, by the way. But
I did not know this.
yeah,
It's
great.
it's a snapshot, though, right? Like, that's the way I look at it with these things. When you watch a single game against the team, you're seeing a snapshot of what they do. You don't, you're getting this one instance to kind of glean as much information as you can from, and then you're not seeing them again till 6 months down the line when you've forgotten everything, and it's a completely different momentum for both sides. So where are you coming into this? You come into today's game to watch, well, yesterday's game, sorry, to watch game 4. Yeah, game 4, Celtics Heat. What were some of the takeaways you had, what you didn't expect to have?
Well, I mean, I've been told by you all year how good Derek White is or has become, I guess.
Yeah, dude.
And this is just the best example possible, really, I do think I have an interesting perspective from that point of view. Like Porzingis changes the dynamic to this entire team. I got a handful of games throughout the regular season. I've watched all these postseason games, obviously. But Porzingis just totally changes the dynamic that they have, the size, his versatility on the perimeter or down low. Like they just really punish switching, and they have their own switching availability as well. And then all these the complementary guys, which Derek White probably goes beyond that, and probably the same as Drew Holiday, but they really are like elite complementary role players, you know. And I think back to mentioned Terry Rozier earlier, or like Marcus Morris and guys like that, and it's like this is just a little bit of another level. They have the perfect complementary pieces. And even a guy like Horford still being around and doing it the right way where he can still be productive, lessening his responsibilities so he can still be efficient and effective in his minutes. And obviously how the two Jays have come into their own, but it really stands out to me how much all these ideal complementary pieces, I guess role players, but it almost doesn't seem like a high enough of a word for the production that these guys are putting up, but they're such perfect fits that can just do everything. Like Derek White, that even throughout the course of the 38 points, like I think the most impressive play for me was when he got around that Bam Adebayo screen and somehow managed to block a three, like right after he got around it. He's still doing all the little things. And I think that's what the Celtics do really well is they have the star power at the top and their role players just take care of all the details.
So I was trying to share my screen at the same time. So you've got me into a really good train of thought with the role players that they've got, and you've led me into a video that I saw yesterday, right? So the video was, I don't know if you've seen it, Rich Paul talking on Sirius XM NBA Dash Radio. Such a long name for a radio station. Can't we just call it NBA Radio? And it's Rich Paul talking about the Phoenix Suns and how their roster construction was, air quotes, a catastrophe. Have you seen that clip?
I have not.
That team has been coming for the last 4 years to be in this position they're in, and they can beat anyone. So I'm really not surprised by that. You never want to get swept, and obviously I'm sure that part stings. But when you look at the Suns, they just don't have the depth or the balance. Listen,
Yep.
I'm a firm believer that a big three is a catastrophe. You need a big two in depth. And I've never been a firm believer of and there's been a misconception of a big three. People talk about the Heat. They never had a big three. They had three big names, but they didn't have a big three, right? So we've, as an industry, has pushed that narrative, but it's not really that. When you look at the Warriors, when they were elite, when they got KD, they had a big two in Steph and KD, and then they had a tremendous amount of depth. Draymond, Clay, so on and so forth. Lakers in 2020, same thing. So to me, a big three is troublesome, and Philly's going to have to make a decision this summer, and if they go that route, it can be troublesome for them as well.
So basically, Rich Paul's argument was that every team, that a big three is a fallacy. Okay, so his argument was if you look through even modern NBA history, there isn't a big three around. His argument was that the Heatles, the LeBron, D Wade, Chris Bosh was a big two with a big name as a primary high level role player. His argument was, and this is the one that I kind of disagreed with, the Warriors, the KD Steph Warriors was KD and Steph big two with Draymond and Clay as elite level role players. Right. So then he's saying when you go and look at Phoenix or any other team that's put a legitimate big three together where there's no depth behind them, and it is just three actual superstars playing in superstar roles, everything falls apart. And when you go back and look at the examples that Rich Paul's using, he is right in the sense that, hey, the Heatles had exceptional depth. The KD Steph Warriors had exceptional depth. And that leads me to depth. That leads me to the Celtics team, right? Would you say that this is a big two of Jason and Jalen with elite role players and elite depth? Or would you say this is a big three, big four?
I guess big two. I do see Rich Paul's point, and I think that if we want to go just like traditional label, I would go more towards big two, and I do see what he's saying with the Chris Bosh or Clay and Draymond. Like it is kind of against the grain, right? The whole Morey ball that a lot of the teams around the league, and it seems like Sacramento is one of those from my perspective, have leaned into is that we're gonna, the guys that we play a lot, we're either going for max guys or close to minimum, really. Or maybe MLE is kind of max you're really willing to throw at the top tier guys. And meanwhile, like you look at, the Suns that we were just talking about, 51 mil to KD, 50 to Brad Beal, 49 to Devin Booker. And then it goes 18 Nurkic and 15 that they just paid to Grayson Allen. And you look at the Celtics situation, and it's just a little more even here, where you got Jaylen Brown, like 57, Drew, 33, Tatum, 32, Kristaps, 30, 19 for, I guess this was previously Marcus. I must be looking at one that still has him included. But there's just a little bit more willing to even financially commit to some of these depth pieces. And I think that's a little bit against the grain from what a lot of teams are viewing as, I think of it as Morey ball in a way of, again, those, we're looking for max and then just bare minimum complementary pieces. And you see that bite a team like Phoenix. And the way that it helps Boston is if your stars don't show up, which ideally one of the two does every single night, but I think it's realistic to say sometimes that's just not going to happen,
Yeah.
that these other guys still can step up and take on more responsibility.
I like to call that as a scalability, and I don't know whether that's even a legitimate word, but when you look at these role players, and this is where I kind of really agreed with Rich Paul's take, is Derek White in game 3 is the prime example of scalability. And all season, I've been joking that Derek White is the player Austin Reeves wishes he was, just in the ability to be this complete connective tissue, this glue guy that can, on a dime, become a primary option offensively or a high level secondary option and be able to go from just a guy that makes the extra pass or initiates the offense to a guy that becomes a huge driving force of that offense, whether that's driving into the lane, forcing the rotation and kicking out, or whether that's just, calling his own shot in transition and shooting a transition free.
How
And
do you,
go
sorry,
ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. How do you split up the sort of credit for that? Like, there's obviously the players willing to take their names and being capable of taking that to the next level. There's the coaching staff. Derek White talks about Joe Mazzulla after the game. Drew Holiday has complimented Joe Mazzulla defensively. And then there's Brad Stevens, just won Executive of the Year. Like, how much of it is, you got the right players, and also that, like, would this have happened in other systems? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. And I think first and foremost, that's why Brad is executive of the year this year. That's why he, in my opinion, I can't remember if he was legitimately, but in my opinion, he was in contention for that role, that award last year too.
Stick with the
Is
Kings guy that won it.
Yeah, in my opinion, Brad has done a really good job of bringing in guys that, because you can empower people to call their number when they need to, right? But the hardest part is finding people that have the ability and the freedom to call their number, but only do so when they actually know it's going to be worthwhile. You could put anyone on the floor and be like, "Hey, you've got complete freedom. Call your number when you want to," and it doesn't work because there's an ego that gets in the way, or there's an agenda. Somebody wants a bigger contract. Somebody wants to boost their numbers. So I think in terms of like scouting and working on roster construction, not just from a skill set fit, but also from a personality and like the way this roster gels together that way, like locker room dynamics fit, I think you have to give Brad Stevens a ton of credit there. But then you have to give Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Chris, you have to give the players credit because they're all willing to scale their roles back to allow somebody like Derek White to take that additional usage and to take those additional touches because he's got the hot hand and because they trust him to do that. So I do think it's like a 50-50 split, but I think it goes a lot deeper than just locating a player and being like, his skill set is what we need. The Celtics have done a really good job of meshing personality as well, finding good attitudes with each other and making sure that there's a good locker room dynamic, which has been a discussion point when it comes to like free agency and trade deadline. Is you have to be careful about who you bring in because they might have all the talent in the world there, but what happens when their attitudes don't gel well? And now there's a bit of a weird dynamic there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you're spot on with that. Creating a championship contender or winner NBA squad is a very delicate formula, and credit is deserved to a little bit of everyone. I'm curious from your perspective, season high or career high, even for Derek White, 38 on 26 shots, by the way. I believe it's the most shots he's taken in a game, and it's only the fourth time that he's surpassed 30. Was there anything to you as somebody that's watched him all year long? He knocks down 8 threes that was like, this is different? Or did you feel like this was always here? This was just kind of putting everything together in this game?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it throughout the year, right? There was a stretch of play before the All-Star break where White was a genuine All-Star contender in terms of like All-Star candidate, in terms of like this fan base, the Celtics fan base. There was a genuine belief that, hey, White has a chance of being an outside bet here. Like everybody knew that it was going to be tough. So we've seen him have those games where all of a sudden he takes over, the offense is running, the ball's popping, he's really aggressive getting downhill, he's hitting those like short mid-range floater shots, his free balls falling. He and I think that one of the really underrated aspects of D White is how shifty he is, right? Like he looks like, and this is really hard to judge when you're watching on TV because how are you going to judge this if you're not right in front of the guy? But it feels like he's got great eye manipulation. Just the way he sometimes sends the defender like juking a little bit. Looks like he's like faked him out with his eye manipulation. He's really, really good at changing pace. I don't know. There was a play that I think it was one of his first buckets in transition, and he kind of comes over the half court line at speed, slows down, and kind of walks the ball onto the wing, and then just turns the jets on, turns the corner. And you're having to send help from you're sending help from the weak side corner just because there's no one else there because he's just blew up your entire defense just by turning the pace on. So I think everybody knew it was there. This was just a hey, JB is kind of struggling from to finish. Tatum's kind of doing his Tatum thing of letting everybody else thrive. KP's kind of doing whatever. Like, let me just take over for a minute, and then it just so happened that that stretch went on for a while.
Yeah, and they have moments just like every team does in the league. I mean, especially when you go against a defense like the Heat that really jugs things up in the postseason and all the scouting that obviously goes into this. Team's very familiar with each other, but one of the Celtics things has been kind of these moments of the offense getting bogged down and having another guy that can create, that just looks like he's both very intelligent and well coached throughout his career. Obviously coming from Pop, you'd imagine that that's the case, but just having another guy out there. I mean, they needed him in this one. You don't want to mess around and let Miami feel like they got a little bit of a chance here. And for the most part, the Celtics, I guess I'm hesitating to use dominated because it got a little sketchy at times, specifically offensively for the Celtics, but they were in control pretty much the whole game. And they needed pretty much every bucket from Derek White to do that.
Yeah, he was. And what I liked was after the game, his quote was like, I could have scored 0 points and we still would have won. It was like, that was a humble brag, right? Like, to me, that's kind of like, yeah, I just had the best game of my life, but I didn't even need to be on the floor for this game to have been a win. Like, that's kind of why I like Derek White, because it's that kind of jovial approach. And then when you look at the way the Heat are playing at the minute, you mentioned like they like to junk it up, and it's really tough in terms of trying to figure out how these tweaks between both coaches are working because there's no flow to the game. There's no rhythm to the game, and that's credit to Miami and the way Miami play, the physicality they bring, just the way they just pick up points. 1 minute they're picking you up near the logo, the next minute they're sagging off and inviting you to try and attack the perimeter.
They start the game in a zone.
They start the game in a zone, then you've got a 2-3, a 3-2. They go inverted 2-3, and it's like, Jesus Christ, will you guys just settle on like some form of fucking defense? But
if you figure out, if you see the same defense twice and you score 2 times in a row, I promise you are not seeing that same defense again.
Have you ever seen the you ever watch South Park?
No, a little bit.
Have you ever seen the episode where I think it's Kyle goes to the bank and he wants to invest some money at the bank, and he's like, I want to invest $10, and the guy's like, okay, it's a couple of $100, and the guy behind the counter is like, okay, and it's gone. Have you not seen that episode?
I have not.
I'll send you the clip later. But that kind of reminds me of the Miami Heat defense, right? You've seen it, and it's gone.
Yep.
And then you're moving on. And you're like, that must be so frustrating as an offense because you've just figured it out. And a lot of times, especially in the regular season, teams will keep hammering a defensive coverage that isn't working because they're trying to get enough film to figure out how they can make it work. In the playoffs, it is about, okay, this coverage isn't working, but we've had that many reps with X, Y, and Z. We're just going to iterate through until we find one that's successful at slowing you down. And then we're going to wait for you to figure that one out. So it is tough. What I would say is, like, I wouldn't say the Celtics dominated, but I will say I think they dominated the tempo of the game. They controlled the tempo. And I've been quite big on this all year. Like, there's a difference between tempo and pace. Tempo is the speed the game's played at. Pace is the speed that decisions are made at within the game. And I think that you can have a high-paced game with a slow tempo. You can have a high-tempo game with a slow pace. So, and I think that what the Celtics did in this game was, in game 2, their pace was very slow. Their decision-making was very sluggish. Game 3, they picked it up. It was a medium-tempoed game with a high-paced decision-making. And then this game felt like they'd found a good medium in both. Decisions were coming quick, but they weren't being rushed. So they were taking care of the ball better. The cuts were more timely. It was giving opportunities for secondary cuts. They went into some give and go actions. So there was a lot there for Boston to kind of dominate the tempo of the game. But Miami is so tough to break down, dude. Like it's just it really I can't imagine how frustrating it must be.
The second quarter was a slugfest, man. 19-12. Neither team reaches 20. Like, it's the most Miami game there is, you
Dude,
know?
I tweeted it
And
out, like sorry to cut you. I tweeted it out like
you're good.
you're midway through the third quarter as Miami score 50 points. Midway through the third in 2024 as Miami score 50. Sorry, continue for.
Pretty insane. It's pretty insane. And I think the big thing for these remaining games, like I think the Celtics should be able to take care of business, obviously, but like you see the Knicks be a very ugly offense, but they're efficient and they do it just by winning the possession game. They force turnovers, they get offensive rebounds, and they get to the free throw line. And I think that's really all the Celtics have to take care of to win this. They're the better team. Do not let them get more possessions when they're already a bad offensive team. You look at that game too, where Miami gets, obviously they were on fire from three, but a decent amount of turnovers in there, 12 from the Celtics. Not that bad, but it's the most they've had in a game this series. Miami gets to the line the most times they did in that series, 18, and a few offensive rebounds in there as well. Like, I think winning the possession game and not letting what already is a bad and very ugly, by the way, offense. I wish Rozier was out there just for an entertainment standpoint in the storyline. But I just don't let them get more possessions than they already deserve. Put the period on the play by getting the defensive rebound. Don't have turnovers that get them easy transition looks. And I think this should be set even with Porzingis TBD.
Well, yeah, so I mean, Miami, I don't know if you've seen the report. Miami are going to be hurt as well because Jaime Jaquez is going to be out. He's not playing in game 4. So, and Porzingis being out, the good thing about the Celtics right now is, and this is my opinion wholeheartedly, the Celtics don't need Porzingis for at least 2 weeks, right? You can get through this Miami series. You can whoever you play in the next round, you have enough big man depth to kind of deal with game 1 and game 2 and still be fine. I think if it's Cleveland, there's a little bit more of an issue just because of the size Cleveland brings to the front court, just in that Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, and the way they use Mobley as a floor spacer in the corner. That's just a nightmare to try and match up with. You'd have to go double big. But the good thing is Boston got Tillman. They brought Tillman in during the trade deadline. They've converted quite Nemi, who you're very familiar with as well. So they do have the big man depth to kind of not cover for Porzingis because he's too good and too valuable to cover for, but to at least kind of soak up some of the minutes that you'd be missing with him. And, I think Tillman gives you a lot of what Al Horford does. He brings some physicality, he can bring some post passing, but you just kind of got to win by committee. And it's not like Horford hasn't been the starting big on a team that went to the NBA Finals 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think it's just about how many minutes can Horford
Yeah.
stay at good production. I'm sure he can stay out there, but at what point does it start to affect his game that much? And who do you feel most comfortable with after? Like, is it Tillman? Is it, you need Cornette? Like, I guess
Big
probably
Cornette.
Tillman, right? You think Cornette?
Yeah, Cornette's been the guy that
Okay.
the trusted, and he's been good, dude. Like, I've been quite impressed with Cornette. I think his ability to contain ball handlers on pick and rolls has been shockingly good. He's really good at kind of like splitting himself between the roll man and the ball handler, deterring the rim, taking away the shot, while also picking up the big. He's actually quite good at playing that angle. He's really good at attacking switches as a slip screener. His veer screens a ton, so sets the screen flows into a secondary screen. He's got his 7 foot, so he's always going to be a bit of a lob threat round by the post. He can create out of the short roll. He just fits what Boston needs from a big man quite well, and I do genuinely believe that he's a solid example of how to be an effective perimeter big that doesn't shoot threes. I think that if you watch Cornette play throughout the season, what he does around the perimeter is exactly what you need from a big man that is not a perimeter shooting threat. So I think that Cornette gets that first go, and if it doesn't work, you go Tillman.
Makes sense. And those guys have a lot of value, those type of bigs that you talked about. I'm curious from your perspective with Porzingis, assumedly being out for a little while, still TBD. Where do you feel like that affects the Celtics the most, where they kind of have to change things up. Offensively, obviously, he has the 3-point shooting that's been a big deal. The high release point is something that was a topic of conversation throughout the Kings this year, how they didn't have much length. And I think that even dealing with teams against length, I think something that gets lost is high release points. And KP is obviously elite at that. But then the mismatch hunting down low, and then defensively, obviously kind of roaming like a Robert Williams Time Lord-ish. But where do you feel like they would have to adjust the most without him?
There's not really much in terms of like schematic change. Because Horford gives you that perimeter pick and pop. Cornet gives you that size around the rim. It's tough, right? Because you have everything that Porzingis gives you. You just don't have it in one player. That's what makes Porzingis so important. You get that rim protection with that floor spacing, with the passing out of the post and the post scoring. You can get that from elsewhere on the Celtics, but you have to pick which one of those three things you want the most at that moment. Do we want the perimeter scoring? Do we want the rim protection? I think that what we might see is without Porzingis, maybe the starting unit moves away from playing drop defense as much. Maybe we go into more of a switch heavy system because Al Horford is far more, I wouldn't say far more, but he's more versatile and more mobile and fleet footed to be able to contain guys in a switch 1-5. Maybe we start to see more cross matching which we saw earlier in the season where you put Drew Holiday or Derek White on Bam so that when a pick and roll occurs, Bam's getting switched onto Horford rather than getting switched off of Horford. Those cross matches have been elite. We saw it a little bit in game 3. You'd see Peyton Pritchard picking up like Kevin Love. You'd see him picking up Bam. And then when the scram came, there'd be a bigger body coming in to contest a shot just at that time. So I don't expect major changes as much as like subtle little tweaks and just understanding that, hey, maybe when Luke's in there, we are going back to that switch 1-4 and drop at 5. And when Horford's in there, maybe we do go switch 1-5 and play a bit more of a pressure-based defense.
Makes sense. And reality is like they should be able to take care of, like you've said, Miami, and really a couple games in this next round too without Porzingis, but like win this game 5. Don't mess around. Don't let them extend this series. Don't have to go back to Miami. This is not a team that you want to play with, I guess, like play with your food in a way. And, with these injuries being tallied on, like just another reason that close this out.
So I tweeted this earlier this morning, my time. So probably overnight your time and maybe very early morning Boston time. So somebody had said like, Porzingis, we can get to the NBA Finals without Porzingis. We just need him to beat Denver. And while I agree with that take to an extent, my pushback there, and I'd like your take on this, is it's all well and good getting to the finals, but how difficult was your path there without Porzingis? How beaten up? And I'm sure you were the one that said this to me a few weeks back, was like, whoever makes it out of the West is going to have run a gauntlet. They're going to be beaten. They're going to be tired. They're going to be battered and bruised. The Celtics' advantage here was it's an easier path for them because they're so talented, because the East is very top heavy and the Sixers look like they're about to get bounced. The Bucks look like their injury issues are about to get them bounced. And now all of a sudden it looks like it's a very easy path for Boston into that NBA Finals. But without Porzingis, does a 5-game series turn into a 6-game series or a 7-game series? Does a 4 turn into a 5 or a 6? Do those extra miles screw you up when you get to the NBA Finals and you were meant to have like a rest and health advantage now that Porzingis isn't there and you've had to stumble your way through? How much does that change the narrative?
It definitely matters. And even, 48 minutes more of action, just another set of minutes out there that another guy could suffer something, So it definitely was that's kind of something I've wondered about with Denver all year long. Like, assume that Denver gets all the way, right? It's going to be the Lakers in the first round, or, even though 4-1, that's not an easy team. And then now they're going on to Minnesota. They get to play the team that's pretty much been the 1 seed all year long.
Who could
and
potentially,
ended up at 2.
They could shock them.
They have the guy that everybody's calling the next MJ right now.
I'm loving him, dude.
I love him. Edwards. I think every person in the world loves him.
If you don't like Anthony Edwards, like, dude, what's going on?
Maybe some Suns fans out there, but fair enough. And then, the next round, assuming OKC advances, you're going to face the 1 seed. Like, you're literally facing LeBron and AD, the team that you beat in the Western Conference Finals last year, and then you're facing the 1 and the 2 seed as the 3, or the 1 and the 3 as the 2, I think is what it ended up being. They were all very close. And that's a tough road. What injuries could they sustain throughout that run, or how beat up are they going to look trying to get through Minnesota, and how much of a battle is OKC going to put up? And on the other side, like, neither of Cleveland or Orlando look that good. I guess Orlando's looked better recently, or Cleveland's just kind of like had a collapse of sorts, but it feels like something Boston should be able to take care of. And then the Knicks. And I'm really high on the Knicks. I really enjoy watching the Knicks. But like I said, they do it ugly. And I don't know how reliable that necessarily is when you get to a 7-game series against a team that, was close to getting 65 wins this year. Or what they end up with? 60.
Off the top of my head, I don't know, because
64.
See, there we go. That's as soon as we got to the NBA playoffs, the regular season statistics went straight out of my head. I'll tell you what.
Probably the last 5 games of the regular season went out.
I stopped caring, dude, at that point. I was mailing it in. I'm not even gonna lie. I will say that the Knicks are a concerning team, but for me, the deeper they get, the more beatable they become, in terms of they don't have that experience yet. And I said this on a Knicks Film School podcast recently. I said this on a mailbag episode with John Macri, where we kind of cross-posted. My biggest thing with New York at the moment is you're a year away from being a contender, because you need this experience right now, and you need to grow from this experience. But you also added the talent that you added to make you a contender hasn't had time to really become like a bedrock of your team. Anunoby joined very late December, towards towards New Year's Eve. Anunoby joins. Bogdanovich and Alec Burke joins on the trade deadline. Jalen Brunson is there, but you've got no Julius Randle because he's out for the season. Mitch Robinson's in and out of the rotation with an injury. Look, it's just, the deeper you get, that lack of experience and lack of your second star plus your best rim protector, that's going to make you an easier out. You can play as hard as you want. You can score as many threes as you want, but you're up against the Celtics team that have been to multiple conference finals, to an NBA finals, and have arguably the most talented top 6 in the entire NBA. So it's going to be really difficult for the Knicks to beat them, but I still see that being a 6-game, maybe 7-game. I think that's the toughest series of Boston's playoff run going into the finals.
It's got to be. I mean, they're definitely the ones. Like I said, they beat you up. They play very physical. That's a team you can't really turn the ball over against. Again, same with the possession game. That's where that would get extremely important. That's how Thibodeau manages to get an efficient offense, even though it's ugly as heck and Jalen Brunson shooting 40 mid-rangers, but when he gets taken out the game, or best that defenses can, obviously, and you try to make other guys make plays, like Josh Hart has come up big in this series. This guy made 1 3 a game throughout the regular season, 31%. He's at 4 threes in 3 of these 5 games. Is that going to keep up? Miami last year, Miami shot ridiculously all the way until they got through Boston, and then remembered that they didn't know how to shoot, just like they didn't know how to shoot all regular season. Yeah, is that going to happen for the Knicks? Dante DiVincenzo became a really, really good player this year. I've always loved Dante DiVincenzo, but is he somebody you're comfortable? This guy's shooting 12 threes, and
how does
that's the guy, one of the guys they're relying on. And I agree with you of those questions. If that's going to be one of the guys and these others that you're relying on, at some point they do probably just need the reps.
Yeah, and how does, it's not just that. How can I word this? Okay, Dante DiVincenzo shooting 12 threes a game. How did you fare when Drew Holiday's the guy guarding you? We've just seen what he does to Tyler Hero. Apart from game 2, that was an aberration. But for the other 3 games, we've seen how he's locked your ass up. We see how Derek White, you're going up against one of the best defensive backcourts in the NBA. They're called the stock exchange for a reason. Do you know what I mean? Because you constantly, the bottom's falling out every time you're playing them. You can come in with a high stock and you're leaving penniless, basically. Or at least that's the way I took it.
It's a great name. What do you think of, I guess we don't need to get too deep into the matchup, but real quick, I feel like the Celtics offense and the Knicks defense, it would be a big question mark in that one. The Knicks do struggle to score. Celtics a good defense. I think that the Knicks would put up between 80 to 90 points. It's just about like, is Boston able to outpace them, right?
Yeah, and I think that again, I think the Celtics have the scoring there to be able to go toe to toe with anybody in terms of a points per possession battle or a um well, it would be a points per possession battle. I think that the Celtics have enough scoring, enough playmaking, and most importantly, enough defense. So you can try and outscore the Celtics, but where does your advantage come from? If we're talking like go for any team, if we're talking about the Knicks, where do they have an advantage? Is Jalen Brunson an advantage over Derek White or Drew Holiday? I think maybe I might give you that one.
Probably, yeah. But
But
it's,
then
yeah. How are they
Jason,
scoring?
exactly. Okay, can Anunoby shut down Tatum or Brown? If he can only shut down one of them. That means you still have
Mhm.
Derek White, Tatum or Brown, depending on who you choose, and Porzingis as offensive outlets.
And you have a big depth advantage. The Knicks don't play that many guys. Like
Nah.
Thibodeau's kind of notorious.
And they've just
He's going to
lost
play Miles
Bogdanovich.
McBride 46 minutes, you know?
And they've just lost Bogey. He's gone down for the season, needing season-ending surgery. So one of your primary like catch and shoot threats, floor spacing guys that you added for this postseason run that just never seemed to gel, right? Like his minutes have been really
No,
low.
I was surprised about that, yeah.
Yeah, me too. Doesn't feels like Evan Fournier all over again, right? But you know, he's not there. So that's another scoring threat down. I want to flip this though. I've got this. I came in with this question. I feel like we're slowly coming to the end of the episode. So I want to flip this. You've got no skin in this game. Like you don't need to.
Yes, I'm ready for this.
You don't need to give it a take. I don't want you to worry about what anyone listening says. This is a new show. We're still building the audience, right? So we're okay. Bam Adebayo on Jason Tatum. Tatum takes that shot after the whistle. Just taking a shot. That players do it. Did Bam purposely slide his foot, or was that an accident?
They are good friends.
They're
Clearly.
very good friends.
There is zero chance that Bam did that on purpose.
Are you sure? Because
My mind.
people take the most liberties with the people they're closest with.
I mean, I get what you're saying. I just watched the OJ doc. I do not think that there's anything malicious there in the slightest. Like KG was a Celtic for a long time. KG's whole thing, he was obsessed with you are not making a shot after the basket.
Yeah, it's for some
And I know
reason
he's
there's
not
just this
closing out on
value
guys.
there, right? So like,
It's
here's
a
the
mental
thing.
thing. Joe Mazzulla
Tried to
closed out on
block
a
the
guy
shot,
earlier this
dude.
year. What if he just got a little too close, or if I forget who he did it to? If that guy jumped forward a little bit more, like it's unfortunate. Absolutely, there is nothing dirty about that at all. I was surprised it even like became the conversation the way it did.
It did though, right? But that's just because the Heat have this reputation of playing close to the line, and I think the Caleb Martin foul from game one played a part there too. It was getting a little bit chippy. Porzingis had already come up with I know that was a non-contact injury.
Though,
I know, dude. It's tough, man. It is tough, but I had to ask, right? Like I would because it's definitely it's a discussion point right now. Was that on purpose or not? And you're in a locker room, man. I wrote this in today's newsletter. There's definitely a mental aspect to this, but why is there such a big focus on do not let people shoot when on a dead play?
I think it's just as simple as like you don't want to let someone see the ball go in. I think that was KG's
Is
whole
that
thing.
simple?
Yeah, I mean, you could look at, say like Tyler Hero not really rolling yesterday. We've seen what he can do when he can get rolling. If Tyler Hero's taking a shot after the basket, after the whistle, you don't want to let him see it go in. Like NBA players will tell you that you see a shot go in, like you can get rolling a little bit. Derek White did it at the beginning of yesterday. Like I think it really is as simple as you don't want to let someone see the ball go in the floor. And I think that's been a thing for a really long time, or go in the rim. But I think that's been a thing for a really, really long time. And we've seen plenty of instances like this. It's just that this has become a thing that is a focal point for the NBA. It's been a topic of discussion, obviously started with Zaza. They've made it a flagrant and things like that. But, if this was before that rule existed, is this a flagrant at all? Like, probably not. You know? I don't think there's really anything malicious with this. I think it's been a thing forever that players don't want opponents to let them see the ball go through the net, especially on a night where they're struggling to shoot from three. You know, Miami shot 27% from three. Like, do not let them see the ball go in. And I really think, sorry, I got to flip that the other way, but Boston was shooting well. And you just don't want to let them see the ball go in. I really think it's as simple as that. Did you think there was anything else to it?
No, not at all. I think that one of the reasons I asked was because at times, especially when you're covering a team and you become kind of attached to these guys, like, and attached to the journey more than anything, like, it's very easy to be like, oh, that was on purpose, and that's an emotional kind of like take, not a logical one. And sometimes I like to try and check myself there, because you want to be a fan, but also we're trying to do a job right now, so I need to be thinking with the logical part of my brain. So that's why I thought, if I ask you, we can get that logical take and see what emotional reaction I have to the logical take. Does that make sense?
Totally. And that's our job, right? Like, and I don't blame any sort of fan bases for feeling a type of way about things. But my first thought is like, these guys are close. Like,
Yeah, they're
you've seen
boys.
them go back and forth with the block that Bam had before, and
Yeah,
posting it on the anniversary, and Tatum giving him crap after beating him before. Or they were all at De'Aaron Fox's wedding. They were both at De'Aaron Fox's wedding. They're all friends with each other. Like, these guys get along. And really just already knowing that, to whatever extent that may be, I'm not going to claim to know anybody's relationships, obviously, but they clearly are friends, and to a
and they've
decent level.
spoke about that.
And I think that's all I needed to know. Like, already knowing that, I'm like, there's no world where this is intention.
I don't know, man. The competitive fire can get the best of anybody, but I'm gonna look for the best in everybody and say that I agree with you. So I have one more question before we wrap this up, right? And I warned you about this one coming into the show. One of the last ever podcast episodes we did together covering the Celtics. We've done podcast episodes since then, mainly guest appearances. You've guested on my show, I've guested on your show. But one of the last ones we did with you as a co-host was just after Peyton Pritchard had been drafted, and you had gone down a deep draft rabbit hole that year, and the year after that was like your draft phase, your scouting phase. Uh, you was not a fan of that pick, right? You were like, Peyton, who didn't even have him on my board? Not I didn't have him in the first round. Not I had him as a late second round. Like, I didn't have the guy getting drafted. That was basically the take from you. How do you feel now? Like, from what you've seen of him, what you've read about him, his production, do you still feel validated in that take? Do you feel like you want to run that one back? Where you at?
Well, I will say, what is that, 2022? Is this year 2 or 3?
This year 3, year 4, actually,
4?
I think.
Is it 4? Okay. So what, 2021, 2020, one of those
I'm
drafts?
just, dude,
Something
all
like
the
that.
seasons bleeding
Something
together,
like
you
that.
know.
No, I'm
Bear
with you.
with me. This is year 4,
Okay. Damn. Holy,
2020
that was
draft.
4 years ago, man. Okay.
2020 draft.
Wow. That's
And I'm
got me
still
chills.
not letting you forget
Holy
this
crap.
shit.
I don't blame you. I think I went about like 40, 45 deep on my draft board, and I never got to Pritchard. Like, I did a lot
That's
of the
wild.
basic stuff, you know, and was just like, I don't think that this guy, I don't think I'm going to include this guy. Now, I will say I was also looking at it from Sacramento's perspective, and they didn't really need a point guard. So I'm sure that may have factored in a little bit there.
Yeah.
But still, I was not a believer in Pritchard after he was wildly successful at Oregon. I was just like, what does this look like in the NBA? And I'm still a little unsure. I do think that some of the offense is there. I think that he's definitely an NBA player. I think he's a backup player, and that's fine. It like maybe ends up even being, you know, fringe, like, or sort of like third stringer ish. I think he's probably better, but I think that's still in the cards. You know, it's great to see him go out there and just like, you know, just make sure Patty Mills doesn't get rolling right now. You know, go hound him. And some of the defensive stuff, like, you see the effort, but he obviously still doesn't have like great tools when it comes to that. Some creation stuff is cool and encouraging, and I feel definitely better, obviously, about him now than I did at the time.
So what
But
I'm interested in now,
yeah,
is you've just gave that take. I'm going to save that audio, And we're going to come back to this at
Here
the
we
end
go.
of the postseason when there's been a couple, when you've had more Peyton Pritchard experiences, right? Because coming into the season, I had the same take you did. Pritchard would be a consistent third string guard on an NBA team, and he'd be a high level third string guard. Now, a year later, after seeing everything he's added to his game and how he's coped with a bigger role, and he's averaging 22.3 minutes per game, I genuinely believe he'd be top 4, top 3 best second string backup guards in the NBA. I genuinely, and like, I'm kind of like, there's a few teams in the NBA that would be better with him on the starting lineup than what they have at the moment. So Detroit Pistons probably being one of them, which is shocking to say considering they got Cade, right? But like, yeah, I want to see how you feel about this at the end of the end of the playoffs, because I've definitely improved. Like, my opinion on Pritchard is like incrementally improved month on month. And I'm curious to see if he has that same effect on you. And if not, then cool, right? Everybody's got their opinion and you stand on that because you've had to stand on it for the last 4 years. I've never let you forget. But I definitely want to see where you're at the end of the playoffs when you've had some Pritchard experiences, because this was not a good Pritchard game.
No, I'm curious too. I mean, it wasn't a very good Pritchard series. You know, we had 8 in game 1, 7 in game
3 was a very good Pritchard game.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He did play solid in that one. Yeah. 25 minutes too. But I think, like, as you mentioned earlier, you know, covering a team on the West, it's hard to keep up with East Coast teams every single game.
Yeah.
So I would very much take your word for it. And yeah, I'm curious as well to see how my perspective on him changes as we watch more.
Yeah. I'm excited. So everybody, I'm going to wrap it up here. This is episode 2. Obviously, I'm not going to keep counting the episodes because we're going to get into the hundreds and it'll just sound stupid. Brendan's going to be with me as and when he can throughout this postseason run before he goes back to his day job of covering the Kings. I want to have some people popping in and out, some guests, and then we're going to figure this shit out. It's episode 2. We're just figuring it out. Brendan, man, will you be on again later this week at all?
I will. And you know,
There
the
we
last thing I
go,
want to
bro.
say, Adam, real quick, is the Celtics were different to me when they lost Marcus Smart.
Okay.
Like, he was the Celtics to me, right? Like, not just him, but he was so much of what, in my mind, the Celtics were to me watching that team.
Growing up.
I just want to say, yeah, if the Celtics win a chip, please give them a ring. I know he did not play this year. But like,
period, he just barely played.
There's somebody that deserves a ring that did not participate. It's Marcus Smart.
So I don't think he'd accept it.
I love Marcus Smart. I don't think he would either, but like, please.
You're going to anger so many fans. That fan base is split on Marcus Smart, dude.
Really? The Celtics fans?
Yeah, for a long time, years.
Well, I guess you're right, like, because the shot selection stuff was always questionable.
And sometimes, like, he'd call his own number.
Right move. Yes, he would. It's sort of Dante DiVincenzo-ish from when he was with the Kings, at least. But, like, I guess you're right. Now, I do remember them being split. That's crazy. You know, I just love the heart of Marcus, and he always felt like such a part of the identity of the Celtics to me. And that's kind of what I mentioned, though, earlier with the role players thing, is that they went, and it was the right move. Ultimately, obviously, Porzingis, phenomenal. Derek White, really a better version of Marcus Smart offensively, and still has all that defensive stuff as well. It was the right move. I just still identify the Celtics with Marcus Smart and vice versa. And
I know, but dude, I identify as American, and I look out my window and I'm still in England. Do you know what I mean?
True,
it's like...
true. Identifications are complicated now.
Like, we're leaving it there. Everybody, man, I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're not, or if you're new to the podcast and you found the podcast before you found the newsletter, go check that out, the CelticsChronicle.com. Sorry, it doesn't. It's just CelticsChronicle.com. Is it the Celtics? It's one of the two, right? The link's in the description. Make sure you're following Brendan at Brendan Nunez. That's with a Nunez with an S, not a Z. NBA at Brendan Nunez NBA. That's where you're at.
Correct. Yeah, with an S. Portuguese, like Nimi.
There we go. Portuguese like Nimi. Everybody, will catch you later this week. Appreciate you being on this ride with us. Again, if you're new, subscribe to the newsletter. If you're subscribed to the newsletter, why not go paid? You get more you get more than what you get when you're not paid. Everybody have a good one. We'll catch you after the Celtics close out this series on Wednesday. Peace.